Welcome to Aligned AF, real talk for evolving souls with Yahweh Kent. Join Yahweh for honest conversations on spiritual growth, the messiness of life, and how to move through it all at a higher frequency. So grab a cup of tea and let's sail in. This is Aligned AF, and here's Yahweh.
You know, a lot of people talk about being spiritual, but few have walked the path of spiritual activism, the space where fire meets faith and compassion meets confrontation. Beth Green's journey started long before she ever used the word spiritual. As a young girl, she was already raising her voice, writing letters to major newspapers, calling out injustice, and speaking out against nuclear weapons when most kids her age were just trying to fit in. Activism was in her bones before she even knew what to call it. But in the mid-70s, something profound shifted. Beth experienced a spiritual awakening, one that didn't silence her activist fire, but refined it. The anger that once fueled her became compassion with purpose. The fight for peace became an inner practice of healing, balance, and truth. And out of that awakening came not just her continued activism, but also her intuitive music. Compositions born from the same spirit that once wrote protest letters, now expressed as frequencies of healing. Spiritual activism isn't about choosing between love and justice. It's about bringing consciousness into the conversation, speaking truth in a way that heals instead of harms. And that's exactly what Beth embodies, a living example of what it looks like to raise hell with heart. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Aligned AF, Real Talk for the Evolving Soul. I am
You're
your
hired.
host.
You are hired. I need you. You have that was brilliant.
Thank you. I am your host, Yahweh, and I am thrilled to have you all back with me today. I'm excited for today because my show is going to take a little bit different look on things. I've spent a lot of time thinking that maybe I need to keep politics out of the equation or keep, not talk too much about activism or anything like that. And then I realized that spiritualism and activism are not mutually exclusive. And when somebody reached out to me through email and suggested that Beth Green might be a good guest for this show, I put some thought into it, and I thought, you know what? Let me talk to this woman and let me see what's going on and see if we can kind of bring the two together. Now, Beth Green is what happens when a revolutionary heart meets an awakened soul. She began her activism as a young girl, writing to major newspapers and taking bold stands against nuclear weapons. But in the mid-70s, after a profound spiritual awakening, her mission transformed. She then became a teacher, an author, an intuitive composer, and a spiritual guide, blending advocacy with artistry and activism with awareness. Her intuitive musical compositions have become an extension of her spiritual work, designed to help others find healing, balance, and connection within themselves. Beth's story is one of evolution, from protest to purpose, from fighting the system to healing it from the inside out. And today, we're diving into how her path as a spiritual activist continues to inspire conscious change in a world that still desperately needs both courage and compassion. Beth, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. The only thing I would add is that I hit everything. It started with nuclear weapons, but it included, well, actually it didn't. It started with capitalism.
Oh, okay.
It started with the capitalism was when I was 9 years old. I said, there's something wrong with this system. And it just grew from there, and all of it, the anti-war movement, the women's movement, racism, it's all of a piece, actually. So I love what you said. I really appreciate it. And I personally don't see any contradiction. I see only that it's all about overcoming the domination of the ego, whether we're talking about doing it personally or we're doing it socially, politically, economically. It's all the same fight.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that this kind of started for you when you were 9 years old. Let me ask you a question, because when I was 9 years old, I was
Yes.
playing in the woods, teaching myself how to swim, and riding my bike. And how the heck does a 9-year-old girl uh, become an activist? I mean, what inspires you at 9 years old?
Well, I always felt, because I'm an empath, I just didn't know it until I had a spiritual
Sure.
awakening, right? I always felt people's pain and the pain of the woods and the pain of, the forest and the animals. And I was always looking for a way to deal with the needless pain that we create. And just feeling that pain was enough to get me to try to do something about it. And in fact, when I was 5 years old, I was already giving lectures to my parents' friends about prejudice. So, and that's true. This one of my mother's favorite stories was, I come from a working class Jewish family.
Okay.
They were not radicals. They were just poor. And, my parents didn't finish high school. Their parents were immigrants. It was the usual poor Jews. And, those people were making fun of people who came over later on the boats, who had been in displaced persons camps, who had fled the Holocaust, and they made fun of them because, they called them greenhorns, because they wore the old fashioned things, the women had we called them shmatas, kerchiefs on their head,
Yeah.
and and I remember having this conversation saying, you can't tell a book by its cover. You should not be judging people. And people were stunned. And I was 5 years old. So it was already there. It was just this feeling, that there was so much injustice and so much needless pain in the world. And that's what continues to motivate me, is saying, but we could do better. We
Yeah.
could be different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing because, I mean, as children, most of us are molded by our parents, our environment. And you're saying your parents weren't activists in any
No,
way. And then
no.
here's this 5-year-old, you know, I can see you on a soapbox going, don't talk about people like that. That's not the right
Right.
way to treat people. And
That's right.
it's inspiring to see that in a child, and to think, considering the times and considering, what people were going through at that point in history,
Yeah.
for you to be, I mean, did your parents encourage you to speak out like this?
No,
No?
no, they just couldn't stop me. And,
Okay.
but it was funny because you talk about the time. See, I was born in 1945 at the
Yeah.
end of World War II, which we used to
Right.
call the war because that was the war, right? And, we were coming out of the Holocaust. And I
Yeah.
think the weight of the consciousness of what had happened and how, pretty much all my relatives in Europe were killed.
Yeah.
We were just so lucky. By accident, my grandfather got a ticket to come to America because his brother, who was supposed to come, decided not to. My grandpa came. And so if it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have existed,
Wow.
and so these huge forces that really shape our world. And then in the 50s, it was awful. It was just awful, make America great again. Great for whom?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
women had no rights, no economic equality. Blacks were oppressed. All you had to do is have your eyes open and you would see what was going on. But in particular, in 1954, when I was 9 years old, um, uh, Senator Joseph McCarthy was on television talking about the communists and the red
Yeah.
menace and all of that. And he was so awful and so gross. And I
Yeah.
said, anything he's against, I'm for. And I read a
Okay.
book about the Spanish Civil War, and I was definitely on the sides of the partisans and the socialists against the fascists. And also they added the words under God to the Pledge of Allegiance, which I knew was against the separation of church and state. And they executed the Rosenbergs, who were never really definitively proved to have been spies. And all of that happened in 1954 when I was 9 years old. And
Yeah.
starting to read about socialism and capitalist socialism, the real socialism, not what they're trying to make it look like, you know, I said, oh my God, there's so much inequality of power and money and so much abuse. I need to do something about that. And it was a scary time because in those days, the House Un-American Activities Committee, they were blacklisting people. They were putting people in prison for
Yeah.
having these kinds of ideas. And I don't know why my parents didn't stop me. But I'm sure that in their hearts, they knew that what I was saying was true, but they would not speak. They
Right.
didn't have it in them. And they went along with the racism against Black people, which I was horrified by. So I think that, maybe Yahweh, in fact, in everyone's heart, there's a knowing that this is
Yeah.
unfair, that the system is unfair. Uh, and anybody who was really trying to help people was called a communist and locked up, or their lives were ruined.
Yeah.
And so that had to be wrong.
Yeah. So you say like in our hearts, and I agree with you, in our hearts, we know certain truths to be there. And yet in
Mm.
most cases, in so many cases, you allow society to, your surroundings, your environment to pull you in and to literally act out against your heart. Um,
Yes,
in so many cases to the point where it becomes part of you.
yes. Oh, exactly. And isn't that the truth? Well, I wrote a book called Living with Reality, which is
Mhm.
free on my website. And in it, I offer a program for evolving consciousness. And it's a self-help kind of program. And it came straight from the other side. I mean, when I had my spiritual awakening, it was sudden, total, and life-changing because I started to hear this inner voice, God, higher consciousness. I have no idea what.
Yeah.
But from somewhere, I just connected to that intuitive part of me that I didn't even know that existed because I had been more like of a Marxist and, trying to study the economy and thinking that we had to change people from the outside in, change society and people will change. Well, there's truth to that, but you can't change society if people don't change.
Right.
So it's kind of a reciprocal kind of thing, as I call it, the inner revolution. And it all was so obvious to me that it was our dedication to ego and to the me and not recognizing our oneness that was at the bottom of what was wrong with capitalism.
Hmm.
And so and I could see why it happened, that we have this experience from the moment we're born. We're on our own. Whereas we
Yeah.
had been in the womb, right? It's like,
Right.
yeah, feed me, diaper me, whatever it is. And all of a sudden we have to fight for our lives.
Yeah.
And that need to fight for our lives, fight to get our parents to take care of you, if there is, lots of children or lots of stress, or parents are traumatized and are alcoholic or are sex addicts. I mean, because they're people. Parents are
Yeah.
people and they have their own problems. And, watching that and seeing that even as an infant, you have to fight for your survival by getting people to take care of you. And
Yeah.
so we start developing personalities that are geared towards getting the society around us to take care of us. So, for example, if your mother is impacted by guilt, that's her conditioning, then you're going to go out of your way to make your mother feel guilty. So she will ignore the fact that she needs sleep and come and take care of you. And, we're too young to realize that if our parents are well, we're going to get better treatment, right? We
Right.
don't have the concept of what is for the highest good of all. We only know what the ego tells us, which is that it's all about me. And so that is really at the bottom of all of it
Yeah.
oh, I need to make money at your expense. I need to feel powerful at your expense. All of that, which is the spiritual consequence of being dominated by ego, is the same thing in a society and in an economy that's based on profit instead of based on needs.
Yeah. So you mentioned that we're fighting for survival, and we're fighting to get society around us to take care of us. And in most cases, what people will do naturally is to conform to the
Exactly.
society around them so
Yeah.
that they feel wanted, so that they feel a part of this thing. How does a 9-year-old not do that? How does that little girl say,
How did that 5-year-old
no,
not do it? I don't know. I was born that way. I just was. Well, first of all, I was so weird in the world's eyes at that time. And, now you have people like Greta Thunberg and you have
yeah,
lots of children. I just thought, a 6-year-old girl is organizing to save some species that can grow limbs. And she's 6 years old. And you look at that and it's like, there are other children like that, but
yeah,
most of them are squashed.
they are.
And, but maybe more and more people are being born with that gene, with that. No, I don't
Yeah,
know. I was born with I'm going to look at this. I'm going to say what I think regardless of the consequences. And I paid a lot for being who I was,
yeah.
truly.
But thank God for, or thank whatever
Yeah.
spirit, thank whatever you believe in, that your parents weren't the type to squash. That they,
Not until
that they,
later.
no, well,
They started squash me when I became a teenager.
oh, did
But,
they?
but as a child, my mother felt that I had a right to think my own thoughts. I just didn't have a right to live my life the way I wanted. As long as I let her organize, you're going to laugh at this, Yahweh. I was so independent, but I never picked out my own clothes ever. As a
Wow.
child, my mother would take me to the store and she would say, okay, this looks good. That doesn't look good. Or she would bring the clothes home. I never tried anything on, and I didn't look at the mirror. I was so in my head and out of my body. I let my mother run my life, but not my thoughts.
Yeah,
And so she was satisfied as long as she could run my life. She
sure.
let me think what I wanted to think until later in life when she was just appalled at the consequences of what I was doing. It was ruining their dreams.
Yeah.
But I give her credit for that. I really do. Well, for instance, when I was young, I had my parents let me have their library card. And because, as a child, you're not allowed to take out adult books at the library, at least
Sure.
not at that time, right? So I would go down to the library with my parents' library card, and I took out a book by Aldous Huxley. And he was, uh, not that I understood anything he said, but I was really
Still.
interested, and I mean, I'm a kid and he's really out there. And the librarian said, no, you can't have this book. You can't use your parents' card. And this is not allowed for. So I went home and I said, they won't let me take out books. I don't know how old I was, but I was really young. And my parents marched down to the library and said, my daughter can read anything she wants. And they said she has my library card, and they backed down. Um, But already, as I told you in our private conversation, when I was 9 years old, I was threatened with expulsion from elementary school
Wow.
because I refused to salute the flag after they added the words "under God."
Oh,
I said,
wow.
this is not acceptable. I will not support. And at that time also I was watching McCarthy, and I think, I am not, first of all, why am I pledging allegiance to a flag?
Yeah.
Are you serious? You're
Yeah.
supposed to pledge allegiance to a flag, not to a set of principles,
Right.
not to, to something. And I can't say that my parents were thrilled with it, but that was the deal we had. But as I aged and more I got in trouble with the authorities, my parents were very unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah, they were
Wow.
scared. They came
Yeah, of
out of the
course.
Depression. They had no, neither of them had a high school diploma.
Yeah.
My mother was brilliant. My father wasn't, but, they had they had it tough. It was very hard for them. And I can understand that they didn't feel confident. And I grew up at a time you could still see signs that said no Jews or dogs allowed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So there
Well,
was a lot
at
of
least your dad was
anti-Semitism.
smart enough to marry your mother.
Right. He was. God bless him.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing stuff. And to see you, to just imagine you going through that as a child is just, it's mind boggling. I mean, I'd like to consider myself an open, supportive parent. And naturally, I will let my son read anything he wants to read. But even still today, I mean, it's 2025, and there are certain books they're obviously not going to have in the elementary school because they're already putting limitations on the children,
Oh,
saying, well,
yes.
this is beyond them. They're not old
Right.
enough yet. Well, you know
Right.
what? If the
They
child
may
has a
get the wrong
desire,
ideas.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. God forbid we get them to think for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Which is so important to teach children critical thinking.
yeah,
And I was born with the critical thinking gene. I don't know that anything could have changed that. I was so isolated as a child. The other children didn't want to talk to me.
sure.
They were so different. They were so conformist. They were all trying to
Yeah,
please somebody or their parents. So I was very, very isolated. I was isolated actually until I created my own spiritual organization when I was in my 30s. I was
wow.
isolated. I was even isolated in the movement because
Yeah,
I didn't have the same beliefs as the other kids did who were, I was a Marxist. I read the books. I saw what the problem was, the exploitive nature of making a profit off somebody's labor. I could understand it. It was perfectly clear. But the other people who were in the movement were rebelling against their parents, smoking pot, fighting for free love. I'm not putting them down, but that just wasn't my bag. You know
right.
what I mean? I was looking at what is wrong with society and what is causing this. And I would say, I really started to focus on women's issues, which I hadn't before. I had been focused on class issues, on, the economy. And then I began to realize how oppressed women really were. God, we didn't get the vote till 1920. I was born in 1945.
Right,
It wasn't that long ago.
right.
We still didn't have rights over getting credit cards and our own finances. It was, and I suffered mightily because I had this big breakup with my parents when I was about 16, 17 years old. And and by 18, I was living on my own in New York City, totally impoverished. Being an impoverished young woman in New York City at that time just opened me up to every conceivable abuse.
Yeah, yeah,
And I had no support from my parents because they
no,
couldn't control me. I wouldn't be the good girl. I wouldn't be who they want. I had the nerve to go out to have a relationship with a black man, you know. And I said, how could you as Jews be prejudiced against
Right.
anybody?
Right.
So I just couldn't do it. I couldn't let them tell me who to be and what to think. And it was sad for them. But all of their dreams for their daughter were collapsing because of how I was. You know, they wanted me to go to an Ivy League college. They wanted me to become a professor. It's the fantasy of every Jewish family, right, is that their children will get an education and have a better life and all of that. And they wanted that, but I couldn't do it. I had to stand up for what I believed in. And I got, expelled from college. And I was only 16 when I went off to school.
Yeah.
And
And
they came after me.
when we spoke, you said you went to Smith. Is that correct?
I did. See, I had a very difficult situation. I was born with a hereditary health issue,
Okay.
and I was very sick from the time that I can remember. So I would go into a gym class, and you were expected to do this or that. I couldn't do one thing, not one thing. So I kind of gave up on my body because it was so weak. And I had a lot of illnesses in addition to the hereditary condition, which was called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, where you have weak joints and the connective tissue in your body is kind of missing
Mm.
or weak. So, I mean, it was like there were so many things that were wrong with me, and nobody understood it at the time. Nobody said,
Right.
"Oh, she has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome." I didn't get the diagnosis until I was 72. Nobody knew what was wrong with me. I was
Wow.
just sick all my life. And then I had scarlet fever when I was a child, all of the other illnesses. I had my tonsils taken out and I hemorrhaged because I had weak capillaries. So, my life was not exactly great. And then when I was 15, my body just collapsed.
Yeah.
And that's when we discovered that I had rheumatic fever. And that's a killer. It was a killer. It can still be a killer. And so then for the next year and a half, I was either in bed or in a chair. And I was told that if I walked or moved or did anything, I would die.
Yeah.
And I didn't get an education. I mean, this is in the middle of my junior year in high school. I skipped a grade and I started young. So I was like the youngest everything, also the shortest. So to this day, I weigh 98 pounds, right? So anyway, I was filled with, oh my God, you're going to die. Oh my God, you're going to die, right? My parents were freaking out. And they didn't have the means. They weren't wealthy. They didn't really have the means to have people coming in and taking care of me. You know what I mean? So I sat alone in the house for a year and a half. And my brother came home with some of these books, like to prepare for the SATs or the Regents review books for the New York State Regents exams. And that's basically my education.
Wow.
From the middle of my junior year until I graduated as a senior. But I did have a woman who came to the house twice a week for an hour and a half, and we read Shakespeare. She was supposed to be teaching me all kinds of things, but she never did. So we read, that was fun. And at least it broke up the monotony of being all by myself. And this feeling of being alone and isolated, which I had felt as a child, they used to call me, as a little thing, they called me the walking, talking, pocket-sized dictionary. Or they called me broccoli because my hair stood up. I had the wrong hair, the wrong nose. So I was very, very, very isolated. So at that point, I started applying to colleges, even though they saw from my record that I hadn't been at school for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And based on my SAT scores, I got into 2 Ivy League colleges. But the rest of them were too scared to let me come in because they were afraid that I wasn't well enough. And they were right, I wasn't.
Yeah.
One was Barnard, which was with Columbia, where I would have thrived. But Columbia I live 2 hours away from Columbia by bus and subway. And because I did live in the city, they wouldn't let me live in the dorms. So I would have to commute. Well, how is a child who's just coming
Right.
out of bed going to commute 2 hours? So I ended up at Smith College, which turned out to be a very interesting experience where I learned that there really is a ruling class.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
because I was living with debutantes, and very, very anti-Semitic. They had a quota. That's part of how I got in.
Sure.
There
Sure.
was a quota of Jews. And from the gate, they realized they had made a mistake by letting me in, because I had
Yeah.
already written this letter about the nuclear weapons. And they immediately realized they had made a mistake, and they hounded me to death to try to expel me from the school. And I was so isolated at that school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't find any other Marxists there.
No. I can tell you, I lived in Amherst. Smith is right
Yes.
next door in Northampton, and I lived in Amherst for years, and lived there, worked there. I went to the University of Massachusetts, so I know the area really well. And I can tell you that even in the 80s, Smith wasn't that different from what you're describing. It
Wow.
really did not progress all that much. It was known as the elitist. The women elitist school is what that was back then.
And we were
Yeah,
being
and I
groomed
have
to marry men from Princeton and Harvard.
right, exactly right.
That was very important how you cut your lemon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, people see some of these period movies where they show what it's like for women at these women's colleges, these Ivy League level colleges, and they think, well, it's the movies, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, and it's not an exaggeration. This is literally what you were taught.
Yes, exactly. And so, of course,
Because God forbid a woman and a library card, that's a dangerous thing.
Really?
Can you imagine if you had the internet when you were little?
Ooh, that I could have done at home.
Yes, you could have.
Yeah, I couldn't even get to a library for that year and a half. I just sat there.
Yeah.
And was so weak and ill, and there was no rehabilitation. Nobody said, okay, we've got to do something to help this girl be able to develop some muscles. And it never happened. I had no rehabilitation, no socialization. And so I had the social skills that I had when I was 15 and I was in college.
Sure. Yeah. And from your description of how school was going, not a lot of social connection anyway.
No.
Yeah.
No, I used to cry all the time because I sat and ate lunch alone.
Yeah.
Because the other kids didn't really want to associate with me.
Right.
But some of them, I know it resonated with them, but they were too conformist.
Yeah, exactly. They probably every time they even stepped out of their box a tiny bit, they got slammed back down. And so they decided it wasn't worth the trouble.
Exactly. In fact, in my Living with Reality book, I start with the first platform, which is oneness. But the second platform is becoming differentiated. And I define differentiation as individuation in the context of oneness. We know we're one, and now we're different facets of the same jewel. And each facet is different, right? And so, but that we don't separate. We still stay a part of that oneness. And what I saw was that people either separated to say, hey, I'm different. I'm this, I'm that. I. It's still the I. It's still the ego consciousness. And the other side of that was, okay, I'm merging.
Yeah.
That's how I'm safe if I just merge. And we can see that today. So many people, though, are fighting back. And I love that about today. There's a lot of people who are not merging.
Yeah.
Or if they are merging, they're merging with with a group that is in rebellion. Because you can merge with the rebels too. Like, oh yeah, we're all wearing our pants under our butts, right? that's a rebellion and everybody's doing it. So they're still merging.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's what people do. Well, you can see it, the lemmings, right? We believe that is the way to be safe. So if you're going to stand up to authority, you better do it with a group.
Yep. Yep. So let me see. You must have entered Smith in the early 60s, like 62, 63,
61.
61.
I was
Okay.
born in 1945 and I
Right.
started school when I was 16.
Okay. All
And I
right.
was expelled when I was 17, which was the end of my freshman year. They expelled
Wow.
me, but they had me on probations before that.
Wow.
They
And
made, they made,
so
I
you made it
couldn't,
through 1 year.
I didn't make it through 1 year.
Oh,
This is how rotten they were. They put me on a probation, which said I couldn't cut any classes. You take a girl who's been in bed for a year and a half, right? Or
sure.
in a
Yeah.
chair, and you say you can never miss a class. It was just impossible. And then they
Yeah.
put me when I missed a few classes and I was on the honor system, I told them the truth because I was so honorable, right? And
Yeah.
then they put me on another probation where they said, you miss one class and you're out for any reason. And I missed a class. I had been out with the Glee Club. And I had really was having a nervous breakdown there. And a kindly nurse said, take these pills, but don't tell anybody that I gave them to you. And it was something like Milltown or something. It was a knockout drug. I took the knockout drug and I didn't wake up till the next afternoon. I mean, I have a very sensitive body. I've always had I can't take an aspirin, you know what I mean? My body goes crazy.
Yeah.
And so I took the pill, but she said not to tell anybody. So I didn't tell anybody, right? I went in and I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I was sick. And they said, that's it. You have to be out of here by this afternoon. And that was in the spring.
Right.
This was in the spring. And my teachers begged the school to let me finish up my freshman year.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it because, as they said to me, they were going to teach me a lesson I would never forget. And they were going to make sure that I never got into another college. And they put in my record that I had been expelled for infringement of academic regulations, which was nonsense because everybody interpreted that as I was cheating.
Right.
And so I didn't make it through the first year, despite all of these pleas from my teachers who said, come on, you can't do this to her. There's no reason, but it was completely vindictive. And I understood the power of the state in a
Yeah.
way that I hadn't understood before because they came down on me like with a hammer. And, it is only thanks to the city of New York's city colleges where you could go as a non-matriculated student that I was able to go to school. I couldn't matriculate because they made sure that I couldn't get into a college, and
Sure.
I got straight A's. And so then I got into Queens College or Brooklyn College or City College, and except that I was so messed up emotionally, you can't believe it. I did not come out of this unscathed.
Yeah.
I was a mess. Got married. My parents were hiding me when I got home. Hid me in the house. They didn't want the neighbors to see that I was home. I mean, it
Yeah.
was like all the pretense of supporting me kind of fell away.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Because to them, it was a reflection on them as parents.
exactly. And what would the neighbors think?
Right.
I mean, and
Right.
whatever I was doing, it isn't done. I mean, my mother was such a conformist. It isn't done, Beth. And as I heard that over and over, and I said, I really didn't care if it was done, but I did fall apart and got married to an abusive man. I just didn't care. I had to get away from my parents and their negativity towards me and their control, and they wanting me to be who I was supposed to be. And he hit me, which I had never seen in my life. I
Yeah.
didn't know that there were men who beat their wives, and it was pretty terrible. And I told my parents I had to leave him, and they said, "Well, you made your bed; you have to lie in it." They didn't support me. I, he ended up dead, but he started I did move out, and he started following me around in New York City, threatening to kill me. And I had his psychiatrist called me and said, he's serious. He's serious. He's got a
Wow.
knife. He's going to kill you.
Wow.
And I mean, what am I supposed to do? I'm impoverished. I have no skills. I'm sick. And, it was a bad time. So of course, what did I do? I became an alcoholic. What else would you do
Yeah.
in a situation like that is, dull the pain. And that really didn't help my health any. So it was a pretty crazy time. I went through unbelievable experiences.
It's amazing.
I
Yeah.
paid the price of being myself.
Yeah.
But what I didn't lose was myself. And I begged people, pay the price, because you'll live through that if you don't lose your soul. And I'm a living example of that. Even when I had a spiritual awakening, I was completely out of sync with everybody else in the spiritual movement. They were all into manifestation or into making money or, Terry Cole Whitaker. And I said, this is not spirituality. But it didn't matter. It was such a reflex. It was such a reflex to just fight for what you believe in at all odds. And just somehow I did survive, didn't I? I mean, maybe physically I didn't do very well, but I never lost my soul or my integrity.
And that's amazing, because what you're sharing with us today, and the fact that you had all these physical limitations on top of it,
Yes.
so many people would have given up. So many people would have just taken the easy way out and just checked out, just physically said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not here for this ride. I can't win. Everything is against me. And quite honestly, there are, out of 100 people, 94 of them probably would have committed suicide at some point. And here you are,
Yeah.
60, 70 years later saying, I'm here and you can get through it. And
Yes.
Beth, it's
And
so,
that's an important message. And you're right. And I was physically ill. I was
yeah,
hemorrhaging, constantly. I don't know, but you just put
one foot in front of the
I,
other, right?
one foot in front of the other, and I was in the movement, and I ended up being the West Coast coordinator of the Wages for Housework campaign. And this was before my
Wow.
spiritual awakening. And, fought. I had to fight everybody, believe me. And I was under threat from the FBI. They told me that I had been, reported to the FBI when I was 12 years old, and it didn't get any better. But what is your soul worth? And I was, what was funny, I had a debate with some adult, capitalism versus socialism.
Oh,
And everybody heard it. And that was enough. That was enough. It was a
amazing.
very anti-communist. And see, you know what communism is? People don't know what it is. It's from each according to his ability. Of course, it was his then.
Yeah.
To each according to his need. That is the potluck. That is what a potluck is. This is American. This is the true spirit of America. Give what you've got. Take what you need. That's what communism was. That's what Marx meant. It's about not having people having control over people, but together we own everything. Together we always fight for the good of the whole.
Yeah. Yeah. And right now in our country, it's trillionaires looking for more, and families don't know if they're going to be able to feed their children's this past weekend because the ballroom is more important than the SNAP benefits.
Exactly. And it's so mean.
Yeah.
It's so needless. It's so
Yeah.
unnecessary, but it's all about control. The
And
ego
the
is
fucking
always
thing
about
that amazes me the most is that the ones who support this are the ones that are going to need the benefits too.
I know. But they'll blame the Democrats.
Oh, of course. Of course. So
Yes, I agree.
this is
This is the
amazing.
time for a real, but see, this is the time that we need that spiritual
Yeah.
awakening,
Yeah.
that awakening, the awakening that says we are one.
Yeah.
I mean, how can Christianity call itself Christianity and support the treatment of immigrants, support,
No.
this cruelty, bombing people in third world nations? We don't even know anything about them. We
Yeah.
find out they're fishermen, but everything is about power. That's the ego, Yahweh. It's all
Yeah.
about power. I need to have power over you so you don't have power over me.
Right.
And if we go to the psychology of it, we can understand where that comes from. We're trained from childhood that we have to fight for ourselves. And that is so ingrained in us by this society. You have to teach the ego.
Yeah.
You have to teach a child. The child has in it that feeling of oneness and caring. You can see it in children.
Yeah.
They care when they see somebody cry,
Yeah.
but they also are competitive because they're looking for the advantage. So which wolf are you going to feed? Right? Which aspect of humanity are we feeding? And it's been the wrong one. So
Yeah.
to be honest with you, as horrible as the Republican administration has been, I don't know that the real revolution, that the inner revolution is going to happen. I only hope and pray that it does,
Yeah.
because if we don't change, we will repeat the same thing over and over. I am sure that the Bolsheviks in Russia were extremely idealistic, and yet they couldn't control all the forces against them, and there were
Yeah.
a lot of forces against them.
Yeah.
I look at what what has become of the Israelis and the Jewish people who are supporting them, and I'm devastated.
Yeah.
I'm devastated. What happened to the Jewish people that I knew, which was about caring and about being at the forefront of progressive movements and all
Yeah.
of that? It's fear, the fear with the trauma of the Holocaust,
Yeah.
the fear of being surrounded by all these Arab nations who want you dead. It's amazing how many Israelis have stood up against the government.
Yep. Yeah.
So there's always
So
people.
much. So much. So much. So let me kind of shift the tangent a little bit. You said in the 70s is when you came upon your spiritual awakening. So was there a moment, like a point where everything just kind of shifted for you?
Yes. Well, actually, I had it in two parts: a spiritual
Okay.
awakening and then a psychic awakening.
Okay.
Spiritual awakening in 1978. I had a very bad experience in the political movement with a woman who was just wanted to control everything. She was the ego run amok. And we had, it was an international organization. I was running one part. There was a woman in Toronto running a part. There was a woman in New York running a part, and a woman. And so I hate this. Well, it was part of the women's movement. So she started to pick us off one by one. First, she started with the women in New York, and she made up all kinds of reasons. And then she came after me. And I immediately thought it was my fault. I just thought, I'm terrible. I'm a terrible person. And I was very, very active. I was organizing demonstrations that I couldn't walk in, of course, fighting to bring support to the prostitutes when the Hillside Strangler was out. I was very, very, very involved with all the situation of women's impoverishment and how that made us weak. And she didn't like that. I was getting publicity. I was on the air. I was recruiting lesbian group, Black women, and all of that. So she had to get rid of me. So I thought I was terrible. I had done something wrong. Well, it just so happens a few months later, the woman in Toronto came and she said she just did it to me. The last one who was left standing, she did it to her. So at that point, I knew 100% that it wasn't me, that it was her. That was a big relief. But they were so rotten to me. They acted like I was going to steal the corporate seal. I mean, it was insane stuff. And so they cut me off, and I was devastated because my whole life had been about the movement, and I just gave up. And it wasn't the first horrible thing that had happened to me within the movement, but that's another story for another time.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was lost, and my whole identity as a revolutionary, my whole identity. And so I met an alcoholic in the neighborhood. And he was a very dear man, but very messed up, and had been in prison quite a bit and was alcoholic and a drug addict and all of that. He's dead now, so I don't have to protect him, but everybody knew anyway. It wasn't a secret. And I called AA and I said, how can I help him to stop drinking? Because for breakfast, he had a beer, a joint, and, something else. And so it was not good. What can I do to help him? And they told me to go to Al-Anon, which was for the families of alcoholics. And I thought I was going to go there and they were going to tell me how to stop him from drinking. But that isn't what Al-Anon was about. It was about introspection, and it was about spirituality. So I was very anti-spiritual because I was, a revolutionary, a Marxist.
Sure.
And I walked into that meeting, Yahweh, it was just amazing. And I saw the faces of those women, and they had something I didn't have. And I saw it immediately. They had a serenity that I didn't have. And so I said, that's it. I'm missing something. And I immediately started hearing God. Now, this is kind of odd, right? I started hearing this voice. And I thought everybody did. You know what I mean? I didn't know that not everybody could hear God. So I started, and so I would do automatic writing. I start channeling a little bit, but I didn't know anything. And I was practicing the principles of AA, which are the principles of Al-Anon. And it was all about humility and a higher power. Right. And so but that was about, that was it. And so that was the first piece. But I was still really, really sick. So here I am, 37, and I go to a holistic chiropractor who tried to use muscle testing. Are you familiar with muscle testing? Yeah.
No.
Oh, it's called applied kinesiology.
Okay.
They tell you whether something works for you or doesn't by pressing on a muscle like that. I could not hold a single muscle in my body. Not one. I'm 37 years old, and he said I was the weakest human being he'd ever met. So he sent me to a metaphysical counselor, and I went in, and she turned on a green light. And all of a sudden, I could be muscle tested. It was very tiny. It was just but there was a difference. And I thought, now what's this about, right? Yeah. A green light? Right. And so then he started talking about karma. She past lives. And I'm thinking, and so she's telling me about this past life of mine. I said, no, it didn't happen that way. This is the way it happened. And so her mouth hangs open, and so does mine, because I don't know what I'm talking about, but it just all came out like it was there all along. Yeah. And so I went home, and she was amazed. I went home and I told my Al-Anon sponsor about this, and she said, oh, well, can you tell me about my past lives? And I said, sure, why not? So she comes over, and I start telling her about her past lives. Remember, this is the same day, and I'm a counselor. And it already has happened.
Right.
And what happened is very funny is I very quickly passed out of the past doing past lives because I had guides, spirit guides. I had amazing, miraculous experiences where I was told I needed a book. I needed the Materia Medica for a client of mine who had a bladder infection. And I had no way of getting one. It was a Sunday and I lived in Glendale, which is, a suburb in LA. And so I was guided. First I used a pendulum, then I was hearing clearly, and I was guided to go to this address that turned out to be a chiropractic college that had closed. And I thought, okay, well, a chiropractic college, but it was closed. It was bolted. And, so my guide at that time, because at that time I had guides, he told me to go and knock on the door and just to ignore the fact that it was bolted and it was closed and it said it was closed. And nobody came and nobody came and nobody came. He said, just keep knocking, keep knocking. And I said, what am I supposed to do? So because I was obedient, I listened to the voice. The moment I heard it, that was it. I changed my life and I became completely devoted to the spiritual path. And so finally the janitor comes out and he says, there's nobody here. I can't help you. I said, well, KH, whose name was Lord Katumi, was the guide that I had. I said, KH told me that I could get the Materia Medica here. And he said, there's nothing here. So he said, just wait a minute. And he goes back in and he comes out with a card. He said, here's a card of somebody who used to be here. All I can do is give this to you. So I call up, there's no cell phones because I'm standing in a phone booth saying, KH told me to do this. I'm feeling like a nut. I have no idea who this woman is, right? And I tell her this. She says, I do have the Materia Medica. I live around the corner. And she said, but she said, if this is a scam and you're trying to cheat me, it is the wildest scam I have ever seen. Come on over. I trust you. And so she gave me the book. I went home, did what I always did. I closed my eyes. I opened the book at random, put my finger down on something, and it gave me a remedy for bladder infections. And so, I mean, this is just one tiny story among millions about like how I got to buy a house that I couldn't qualify for and all of those things. I just followed my guidance and that was what my life became, but I had a nervous breakdown. Yeah. So that's 1980 and I was already and I became a counselor the first day. So that's how I became a counselor.
Early on, didn't you think I'm losing my fucking mind? I've got to be crazy.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when I first started channeling and I was like, I'm not so sure I'm okay.
I love that, Yahweh. Yes. Well, I got this, somebody was saying to me, oh, this is the devil. This is evil. This is the devil. Yeah. So I asked at that time I was still just using the pendulum, right? And I said, is this good? Am I doing the right thing? And what I got, and you would love this, I know, said, it spelled that because doing this, are you feeling further or closer to me? And I said, well, I'm feeling closer to you, to God. And he said, well, there's your answer.
Yeah.
The stuff that I got, I've written 6 books, but I mean, it all just like came through or out and it was, I'm not that smart, but it was one thing after another. And then I said to my guides, I was wondering what to do. Oh, I mean, they had me buy this huge house. I borrowed every penny of the down payment. I borrowed everything for that house. That wasn't the only one. Interest rates were 15%. And I had like nothing. I was told to quit my job when I had hardly any income. My ex-husband almost died. But it was one miracle after another would happen. And I just kept going the same way that I had before. It was the same insistence that, and the same belief. And then one day in 1984, December 1984, when I had just moved into this house, my guides came. I was having a big celebration. We called it KH's ashram. And then I had Brother M's ashram, all these guys. And they said, we're leaving now.
The guides?
The guides said, we're leaving now. I mean, all these people are coming to my house. We're all going to sit on the floor. I had a sheet. I had no money, right? And they said, it's time for you to own what you know. I said, I don't know anything. What do you mean it's time? And they just left.
Yeah.
And so, and they would come back on occasion. For instance, there was a period of time when I was so weak physically that I could not stay awake. And so I would do my sessions and I'd be sitting there sleeping. And then all of a sudden I would wake up and I would say no. And then I'd go back to sleep. I mean, it was like the guys were doing these sessions for me.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It was just completely insane life. I mean, my life has always been insane, right? So, and then I asked them once, are there really past lives?
Yeah.
And they said, what do you care? If it works to help somebody transform, use it. If it doesn't, throw it out. I said, well, do you really exist? And they said, what do you care? If this is working, use it. If it doesn't, and see, that led to, in my Living with Reality book, to the path of not knowing, is that we make up all this stuff.
Yep.
We have beliefs because they make us feel more secure. They tell us what to do. You know, it's like having your parents telling you what to do. Your beliefs tell you what you're supposed to think, what you're supposed to do. And they said, you really don't know anything. As you know, I believe in the evolving God, not the perfect God.
Right.
And it was that same willingness to be out of step with everybody. So in 1984 or 5, a woman came to my house. She would say, Jesus sent me. You know what I mean? All kinds of, and she made tapes. And she said, I want you to make some tapes, talks. And I didn't have any topics. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. So she turns on the tape recorder and I open my mouth and I say, today I'm going to talk about God. And I did this whole thing like it had been orchestrated.
Sure.
About how God is the totality of all being and that we don't want to admit that. And it's like the white light comes through the prism and all these different colors are the white light. And so at that point, I started talking about God having to heal God's self, that we are God in the process of healing ourselves. And I lost half of my clients overnight. That didn't go over well with a new agey kind of community.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I still have my integrity.
Yes. And, you know, you're describing your awakening and your relationship with spirit and then them suddenly saying, okay, we're out of here. And it's not dissimilar from some of the shit that I went through where, you know, I was channeling for years and my wife and I were developing a spiritual community and then after, you know, years of channeling and kind of being a go-to for my wife and for a few other people, all of a sudden I felt like spirit had abandoned me. It was almost like they didn't say to me, okay, we're out of here, you're good. They just weren't there anymore. And I was like, well, what the fuck?
Yes.
You know, what's going on here? What have you done for me now? I mean, what's going on? And then I finally got to the point where I realized that everything that comes out of my mouth is exactly the same as anything I thought they put there. It's the exact same fucking thing.
Perfect. Because God and you are one.
Exactly.
And all the separation between us and God is nonsense.
Right.
And God is as dark as you are and as light. Well, you know, back to the topic of the ego.
Yeah.
The core ego separation is between us and God.
Yep.
And when we do that, then that leads to all kinds of nonsense like, oh, God is perfect, but people are horrible and we're sinners. And really?
Yeah.
Or even if you're like a new agey, it's like you didn't believe enough. You didn't manifest this because you didn't, you haven't cleared your block to being rich or whatever it is. And, we have to evolve.
Yeah.
But that first separation is between us and God. We stand there and we look in awe at the universe and feel small, and we are small. So what? We're still a part of something, and we don't understand or know where it's all going.
Yeah.
Or what the destiny is. I call it becoming. You walk
Uh-huh.
the path of not knowing, but then you become becoming. Everything continues to evolve, and it never becomes became.
Absolutely perfect. That's, yeah. Beth, this is, your life is amazing. It's inspirational. To me, it's just been, it's good. This has become one of those conversations that I think we could either continue for several hours or come back to and have several more episodes. And I would love to ask you, to come back maybe and play around a little bit more at some point.
I'd love to. I think you're wonderful.
I
I'm not just
appreciate
saying that because you're inviting me. I'm I'm just not that corrupt. But no, I really feel a connection with you. I said that to you. I just said, is there something we're supposed to do together? I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But
We don't know.
I feel that connection. I feel that openness in you. I feel that sincerity in you. I feel that you keep searching for the truth, even though there is none.
Well, shit.
Yeah, you can give that one up.
All right, I'll stop.
Well, God said to me once, remember, Beth, the truth is changing. And I thought,
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. But that's why the search never stops.
Right. Right.
If there actually was an ultimate truth, then we'd be done. We would have figured it
what
out,
would be the point?
Yeah. We go to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The answer's 42. Now move on,
Oh, yeah. No, I really have loved talking to you.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate your kind words. If there were one thing that you could go back and say to your 9-year-old self, what would it be?
You're not wrong.
Excellent.
I mean, that just came right out.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. It is bad. It is bad here. And people do need help. And you're not wrong.
Amazing. For folks out there that want to learn more about Beth, that want to connect with her or seek out some of her writings or some of her music. We didn't even talk about your music today. So, we'll encourage people to go to your website. The number of books you've written, 6 books, that I was fine. The autobiography of Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
Memoirs of the New Age, Sacred Union, The Healing of God, God's Little Aphorisms, which you and I spoke with when we first talked, and I'm seeking that one out because I wanna dig into that one. Reach out to her on her website, because these things are
reality.
And living with reality. Yeah.
And the handbook for the inner revolution.
Okay. I didn't find that one, so we will continue to look. Reach out to her on the Healing Arts Network, where you can also access her music. She's got 6 albums out there: The Gift of Peace, A Soul's Journey Through Darkness and Light, and more. And seriously, seek this one out. and learn more about her and listen to her and read her thoughts, because her thoughts are our thoughts. We're one in so many amazing ways. So Beth, thank you so much for being with me today. Um, folks, talking with Beth reminds me that activism doesn't have to mean shouting louder. It can mean listening deeper. It's easy to confuse. It's easy to confuse anger with power. But Beth shows us that real power comes from presence. She reminds us that healing the world begins by healing our own vibration, that love can roar just as fiercely as rage, and that raising consciousness might just be the highest form of protest that there is. So maybe that's the real revolution right there, becoming peaceful enough to stay grounded in the storm, yet passionate enough to keep showing up for love. Because every time we do, every time we choose awareness over reaction and compassion over chaos, we take one more step closer to living in alignment. And that's what it's all about, getting closer to being aligned AF every single day. Thank you for joining us today. And Beth, it's been my honor.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for hanging out with me today. If this episode spoke to you at all, share it with a friend or someone who needs it. You can also leave a review or connect with me online. You can find Aligned AF on YouTube, Facebook, your favorite podcast channel, or at alignedaf.org. And if you want to reach out directly, you can email me at alignedafpodcast@gmail.com. So until next time, stay aligned AF.